Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tony Meyer. Our top story: China's health authorities reporting the country has hit its first COVID-19 peak this year. People on the ground are reporting severe symptoms, even deaths, including among medical workers. President Trump and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping spoke by phone on trade tensions. Who blinked first? We got insights from a former U.S. ambassador and governor.
The United States and China are very tied together in trade as of right now. But we will be decoupling on the issue of rare earths because we have to have an independent chain of resources for rare earths. And I think we're working hard to get that.
Across the U.S., states are pushing back against growing aggression from the Chinese Communist Party. But are these efforts enough to stop foreign influence?
Many Americans are unaware that China specifically targets states in the United States to undermine what's going on in the United States of America. They have been in Texas going after Chinese dissidents who left China, and they are legally in the state of Texas now.
The U.S. stock market regulator is cracking down on Chinese companies using offshore loopholes to dodge oversight. New rules aim to reveal hidden risks and protect American investors. We're closely watching a sharp rise in COVID-19 infections in China. On Thursday, China CDC reported the country has reached its highest COVID-19 infection level so far this year, with cases steadily rising since March. At the same time, doctors in several major cities are telling us a concerning development. Multiple medical workers have died after contracting the virus. It's worth noting that the Chinese regime has a track record of underreporting COVID-19 cases and deaths. Here's what we know so far. Official numbers from China are often criticized for underreporting the true scale of the outbreak. But this rare admission has already sparked a wave of discussion online. On Chinese social media, users are sharing their own COVID-19 symptoms, including fever and intense sore throats. Some also report noticing a rise in local deaths, but official data remains limited. Here's what one resident from Jilin in northeastern China told us.
Lately, quite a few people have died, several just in the past couple of days. Some were elderly, some were young. One of the older ones actually seemed full of energy, always out for walks in the mornings. That person died before even making it to the hospital.
Zooming in on southern China, Li, a resident from Guangzhou, told us that he and his family members have contracted COVID-19 multiple times. But that's not all. Recent media reports and online obituaries suggest that several doctors in the region have passed away, most of them in their 50s. Official statements attribute these deaths to overwork, but provide few details. NTD cannot independently verify the circumstances surrounding these incidents. One doctor told us authorities may be trying to suppress information about these deaths.
There are doctors at top-tier hospitals in Guangzhou who have died. The Health Bureau told us there's no need to report it. Just focus on disinfection, wearing masks, and washing hands.
This doctor also told us about an elderly doctor who recently passed away just 2 days after being diagnosed with COVID-19 after showing severe symptoms. He added that the majority of patients visiting his hospital are showing cold and fever symptoms. However, many prefer not to take a COVID-19 test to save money, and hospitals are not enforcing strict testing protocols. According to the doctor, this approach is intended to avoid causing panic if test results reveal a serious outbreak. Zooming out, according to China CDC, the latest COVID-19 surge in the country is being driven by a new variant called MB181, also known as Nimbus. The WHO is keeping a close eye on this variant due to its increasing global presence and potential implications for public health. We'll keep you updated as the situation develops. President Trump and Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping spoke by phone on Thursday, with tensions still running high over the ongoing U.S.-China trade dispute. To help us understand the situation, we spoke with Jim Gilmore, former U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and former governor of Virginia. Trump saying after that the rare earth export issue has been resolved and that he and the First Lady will accept Xi's invitation to visit China In your view, who blinked first? What does this mean for U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think they both may have blinked in order to try to reestablish this kind of trade relationship. But I've thought about this a lot during the day as I was preparing to come on your show tonight. You know, everything is being driven by the belligerence and aggression of China. If they would just simply behave like a normal country and try to build up their country instead of all the economic problems, instead of trying to be aggressive against the Philippines, the Japanese, Taiwan particularly, then we wouldn't have all these problems. But right now, how can they expect to be aggressive towards the United States and then have a normal relationship? Meanwhile, of course, the United States and China are very tied together in trade as of right now. But we will be decoupling on the issue of rare earths because we have to have an independent chain of resources for rare earths. And I think we're working hard to get that.
Now, we have seen over the years that Communist China does not play by the rules, as you just pointed out there. Given that, with the meeting or the call this morning, do you see that as a softening from the U.S. side?
Well, look, I'm a hawk. I think that's perfectly clear from the times that I've been on here. I think that you always have to watch out in dealing with these dictators, whether it's the Russians or the Chinese, to not look weak. I don't think that the president is looking weak, but if he has to go on bended knee to Beijing before the Chinese president comes to the United States, that might send a bad signal. But the president is consistent about trying to rebuild relationships instead of having a warlike situation. But it's really up to these dictators, and particularly to China. They're the ones that how can they take an aggressive position towards their neighbors who are American allies, and then expect America to do nothing in response? Any type of reaction we get is on them, not on us.
The Department of Homeland Security is sounding the alarm this week, announcing the seizure of over 100,000 pounds of chemicals used to make methamphetamine. Officials say it's enough to produce drugs that could kill millions. The shipment reportedly originated in China and was headed to the Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico. Let's take a closer look.
The seizure taking place last Friday at the port of Long Beach in California, part of a Homeland Security investigation effort that seeks to stop drug shipments coming in from communist China, India, as well as some other countries. ICE officials saying the initiative helps the agency to stay ahead of the cartels. The CCP is the world's largest supplier of synthetic drug precursors. These chemicals are often shipped to Mexico for further polishing before making their ways into the United States.
In response to the Chinese Communist Party's growing threats to state and national security, an increasing number of states are stepping up their efforts. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Many states are clamping down on the CCP's aggression and transnational repression tactics, focusing on areas including restricting land ownership, protecting critical infrastructure, and countering espionage and influence operations. Arkansas, the past couple of years, hasn't forced Chinese state-linked entities to divest from any owned farmland. It was the first state to do this. Most states have either taken similar action or are currently considering passing similar laws. Missouri won a $24 billion judgment against the CCP in a COVID-related lawsuit in March. The state can now potentially seize Chinese-held assets, including farmland. And Texas passed an anti-transnational repression law in May. Its intention is to combat CCP activities targeting individuals, particularly those of Chinese descent, who speak out against the CCP, attempting to silence and intimidate them.
Well, many Americans are unaware that China specifically targets states in the United States to undermine what's going on in the United States of America. They have been in Texas going after Chinese dissidents who left China, and they are legally in the state of Texas now.
Arizona became the 5th state to ban Chinese-linked organ transplants, with Governor Katie Hobbs signing the Arizona and Organ Harvesting Act in May. Texas, Utah, Idaho, and Tennessee have passed similar laws. However, on June 2nd, Hobbs vetoed a bill that would ban China from purchasing land in the state. She said it was, quote, ineffective at counterespionage. The bill's sponsor, Arizona Senator Janae Shamp, criticized the move by Hobbs, saying it was, quote, politically motivated and, quote, obstructionist. China has a long history of advancing its ambitions by operating in gray areas, using dual-use programs and technology, and more straightforward aggression like bribing and hacking. For example, Volt Typhoon is a Chinese state-sponsored hack group that has been targeting critical infrastructure. The attacks prompted sanctions from the US and UK in 2024.
These cyber operations are part of a broader, coordinated effort by the Chinese Communist Party targeting everything from water utilities in Hawaii to oil pipelines on the West Coast and even the Texas power grid. We must understand that this isn't just a cyber threat. This is part of the CCP's larger strategy to destroy the American way of life.
And also in 2024, a Chinese agent was sentenced to 20 months in prison for attempting to bribe the IRS. The goal was to manipulate the agency to strip performing arts group Shenyun of its nonprofit status. Shenyun is a classical Chinese dance show and was founded by Falun Gong practitioners fleeing persecution in China. Shenyun's shows are known to have segments that expose ongoing arrests and human rights abuses that Falun Gong practitioners face in China. Falun Gong is a meditation practice that focuses on living with truth, compassion, and forbearance. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Next, Wall Street's top regulator is moving to tighten rules for foreign companies on U.S. stock exchanges with a special focus on Chinese firms. Here's the latest. On Wednesday, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, voted to seek public input on tougher reporting rules for foreign companies. Right now, many foreign firms only submit annual reports and occasional updates. That's a loophole that could put American investors at risk. A congressional report reveals that most U.S.-listed Chinese companies trade only on U.S. markets. The majority of them are based in the Cayman Islands, a known tax haven. They use shell entities called variable interest entities, or VIEs, with their parent companies in China. When Americans buy these stocks, they're actually buying shares in shell companies that hold contracts, not ownership, over the company's profits. The SEC warns this setup could let U.S. capital unknowingly support activities against American interests, including advancing China's military. The Commission's new rules aim to close these loopholes, making it harder for foreign firms to dodge U.S. scrutiny and tougher to list on U.S. exchanges. Under a 2020 U.S. law, Chinese companies that ignore SEC investigations for 3 straight years risk delisting or trading bans. Coming up, as tensions with China rise, how prepared is the U.S. for a potential hot war? Our expert reveals why countering China's unrestricted warfare requires a new strategy.
So if you look at the various aspects of China's national strategy, it is technology-based. So the only way to counter that is with a more effective technology strategy.
Senators on Capitol Hill are digging into China's growing grip on Africa. They're seeking new strategies to counter the Chinese Communist Party's harmful influence and deepen ties across the continent. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As tensions with China escalate, the big question on many minds is the U.S. ready for a hot war? But is that really the right question? With China ramping up its military strength and employing tactics like unrestricted warfare, the challenge for the U.S. isn't just about being ready for war. We sat down with Michael Sikora, founding director of the Socrates Project in the Reagan White House, to talk about how the U.S. can best prepare and respond to a complex, evolving threat. Mike Sikora, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
It's always a pleasure.
Now, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was sending a clear message at a defense summit in Singapore, saying any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force will result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. The threat that China poses is real and could be imminent. He also adds that President Trump has also said that Communist China will not invade Taiwan on his watch. Our goal is to prevent war, to make the cost too high, and peace is the only option. Given all of that, is the U.S. ready for a hot war with China?
The bottom line is, it will not go hot until China strongly believes that they will win. Okay, so they'll continue to dance around with trade agreements and all these other things until they know they can win. Now, how will they know? Well, we're pretty infiltrated in this country with Chinese operatives. Their spy networks are unbelievable. As we know, they've bought land around so many of the military bases. They're intercepting. We've had the balloons, so they keep very tight track on exactly our war preparations, including one of the things we addressed before was the cranes. So their cranes are actually looking at what's being brought in, what's being moved around to the bases, along with all the drone data they have. Because remember, they own most of the drones in the United States are owned by China. Okay, they come from China. And the data that comes out of that drones, thanks to China, they said, store it here. You can get cheap storage. So they got all this data. They're tracking this very tightly. So the bottom line is, the question isn't, should we, will we be ready when the hot war goes? And when will it be? But rather the question is, what can we do to prevent China from getting to the point that they will be ready to have a hot war, okay? So the real thing that we have to address, we have to debate is, how is it that China was able to continue to increase their competitive advantage relative to the United States for decades and continue to increase their competitive advantage unabated by anything that we're doing?
As you were pointing out there, China employs its unrestricted warfare or everything short of kinetic war. So besides the military buildup, of course, as you're mentioning, TikTok, psychological warfare, information warfare, lawfare, drug warfare with fentanyl, all these different aspects of basically destroying the enemy from within without even having to fire that shot. Given Communist China's strategy here, how should the U.S. be responding or, countering this?
Well, if you look at it, and Xi Jinping has said this repeatedly, it's every speech just about technology exploitation is the foundation of a country's strength and growth. Okay, so if you look at the various aspects of China's national strategy, it is technology based. So the only way to counter that is with a more effective technology strategy. Okay, now, it's extremely important to differentiate, because somebody say, we got the CHIPS Act. No, that's not a technology strategy. That's a finance strategy for technology, which means we're just trying to outspend them. How effectively you exploit the technology dictates how much money you need to spend in order to generate that competitive advantage. So the only way to counter China's national strategy, which, as you said, is all of government, all competitive environments in a unified fashion, the only way to counter that is to counter the foundation, which is the technology exploitation. So the only way to counter China is with a more effective national technology strategy.
What would that technology-focused strategy be in the U.S.?
So as we have pushed ever since Reagan is to reestablish the Socrates program. 3 pieces of legislation has been passed, put on the shelf, but Socrates allows us to exploit technology, a national technology strategy, which is totally in line with the democratic principles of the United States, which would allow us to totally outmaneuver China's national technology strategy at will. That's what we did with the Soviet Union. We can do the same thing with China.
Mike Sakara, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Senators on the Foreign Relations Committee are reviewing the impact of the Chinese Communist Party's harmful influence in Africa and exploring new strategies to counter it. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
China is exercising its military, economic, and political power and advancing its authoritarian agenda, all while undermining the sovereignty of African nations.
The U.S. is changing its strategy in Africa to better counter China's harmful influence in the region. This means the U.S. will now shift from prioritizing humanitarian aid to investment and trade partnerships. The Chinese Communist Party's interest in the region has been driven by control of critical minerals to undercut the nationwide markets and other forms of market dominance that deprives the region. Take fishing, for instance.
That is the protein for the people. But when you see these Chinese trawlers coming in and utterly destroying the fishing grounds, then suddenly doing a beeline 60 miles offshore, meet a buy boat, offload all the fish, come back to port and say, oh, we didn't catch anything again today. The amount of food available for the Africans is much more expensive, in much less supply.
The CCP has gained influence in Africa over the past couple decades by expanding its Belt and Road Initiative. This is a series of infrastructure projects like dams and ports, but they also double as military installations and surveillance centers.
Unfortunately, China expands its Belt and Road Initiative with surveillance, wired buildings, and infrastructure, debt-level leveraged aid.
Many times, these projects end up costing the host country too much that it can't pay back the Chinese regime and become indebted to them.
China's debt trap financing, which is often opaque, often accelerates corruption, typically does not serve the interests of the people or even the nations of Africa.
When all said and done, many of these projects even end up failing.
When a Chinese tailings dam collapsed and they dumped something like 40 million gallons of sulfuric acid into the Kafue River, just potentially destroying the livelihoods of 6 million people.
And the CCP is using its diplomatic power in Africa to prevent Taiwan from having any connection with them. In April, Somalia banned Taiwanese passport holders from entering the country, preventing the Taiwanese foreign minister from visiting the region.
That when they harass Taiwan like that, they would be putting in jeopardy or calling into question their relationship with us.
Going forward, the U.S. is aiming to make up for lost time to build economic relations with African nations and give them an alternative to the CCP. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Beyond autos, sectors like robotics and defense are also feeling the pressure. Back in April, Elon Musk warned that China's export curbs were already impacting Tesla's plans for humanoid robots. That same month, the White House reportedly began working to appoint an affordable czar to tackle the growing shortage of critical supplies. U.S. auto suppliers are now pushing for quick action as China's restrictions continue to affect key industries worldwide. We'll keep you updated as the story develops. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.